Hey everyone, hope y'all are doing well. We are going to today be talking about our first foray into descriptive statistics, what they are, what they look like. We're going to look at some SPSS data and actually see kind of how that works in there. We're not talking about constructing surveys. We talked about that last class period, but I included this up here because with the assignment, I just want to make sure that you all understand what this looks like and how to construct the surveys using all those steps that we talked about last class period. So if you still have questions, especially about the assignment, please meet with me one-on-one and we'll go over all of that. Same with coding a survey. So we talked about how we numerically coded in a survey in Qualtrics, and you're doing that for your presentation, or excuse me, not your presentation, your assignment, your survey construction, survey questionnaire assignment. So I mentioned that here because we're going to actually see in a data set, in using some Qualtrics data in a SPSS data set, what that coded numerical data looks like. So we're going to see that. That's why I wanted to just quickly mention it. So let's start with descriptive statistics. Let's get into it. What are descriptive statistics? So descriptive statistics summarize data, providing insight into patterns and trends. And the purpose of descriptive statistics are to make large data sets interpretable by reducing them to meaningful information. So it's your basic describing things, right? So you're literally just describing the data. You're not inferring anything from it. You're describing what you can actually see. And so there are different types of descriptive statistics. I mentioned two there, but I'm going to identify two others as well. So the two that I want you to really concern yourself with are frequencies and cross tabulations. Frequencies, that's where you're counting how often values appear or do not appear. That'll make more sense when we actually run them. Cross tabulations analyze the relationship between categorical variables. So for instance, let's say we have the frequencies where respondents responded across the board this way. But what if we want to look at that same question, those same responses, but look at how people of different races responded to those questions? So how many people, Hispanic or Latino individuals answered this way, or Black individuals answered this way versus white individuals answered this way. We can do the same thing with gender, any sort of thing like that. And that's what a cross tabulation is. There's also a couple of others. So there's measures of central tendency is what we call it. And that's where we're identifying the center of the data, where you're probably already familiar with. So means, medians, modes. We also have measures of variability. That's understanding how spread out the data is. So that's measures of variance and standard deviation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Again, descriptive statistics simplify raw data into actionable insights. And central tendency and variability, what those two components do is they provide core summaries. So while frequencies and cross tabulations analyze distributions and relationships, and that's what you're going to focus most on. Um, uh, so, for example, in a study of a social class and education level, frequencies might show the number of participants in each class. Cross tabulations, on the other hand, might reveal trends across social class and degree attainment. So we're going to get into that. All right. So again, descriptive statistics help summarize data. Think about that. All right. Another example could be a study on voting behavior, for example, as we come out of an election year. Maybe frequencies would show the percentage of voters by age group, or cross tabulations can show gender-based voting preferences. Central tendency, you get your average age of voters, perhaps, and then variability, kind of the range, the age range of voters. Like, what's our youngest voter here and what's our oldest? Those are the type of things you're going to find out. Central tendency, again, I just mentioned it, but measures of central tendency focus on the average or middle values of data sets, whereas again, variability focus on this dispersion of data, how spread out it is. So these two measures use graphs and tables and general discussions to help people understand the meaning of the analyzed data. Now, measures of central tendency describe the center position of a distribution for a data set. All I want you to know is that central tendency, you can think of it as mean, median, mode. And again, these things analyze and measure the most common patterns of the analyzed data set. So what's the average of it, right? What's the median? What's the middle of the data points? What's the most commonly selected item? That's what these key items are telling you. We'll show you how we include those in our descriptive analyses. Measures of variability. So this is, again, how spread out or dispersed the data points are within a data set. So some common measures here: range, which you're probably familiar with. So the difference between the highest and lowest values. Quartiles. So you can actually run these in SPS as well. This is where you're dividing the data into 4 equal parts to analyze distribution. Variance also looks at the average squared deviation from mean. Standard deviation, so the square root of the variance, indicating typical deviation. And then your interquartile range is the range of the middle 50% of the data. So kind of your Q1 to Q3 sort of deal. If that doesn't make sense, that's okay. Again, refer to the readings on this, and then we're going to explore all of this in SPSS. So again, think of variability as the dispersion here, and think of things like range as being an example of how to look at this. Distribution. So the definition and purpose here for distribution, what are we actually referring to? So this is a frequency distribution, summarizes how often each value or category appears in a data set. So understanding distribution helps us to identify patterns and proportions and disparities within the data, which are crucial for any analysis we're going to do, especially a sociological analysis. So for example, you see that frequency distribution. You see an example data set, male, where these certain amount of respondents were identified or actually completed the survey. So male, male, female, 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 and other. So in a data set of 6 individuals categorized by gender, as you see there, the frequency distribution would reveal this. This is how you describe this frequency distribution. Males, 2 individuals. Females, 3 individuals. Other, 1 individual. Pretty basic, right? But you can have other sorts of groupings as well. So like non-males could be 4 individuals, the 3 females and the 1 other category. Again, calculated as total individuals, even just minus the male category. So that's an example of how you can look at distribution. And there's so many different ways you can group data sets and answer choices. And now the sociological application here. So frequency distributions are often are used to analyze demographic data, survey responses, categorical trends. Think of like the distribution of educational attainment across different age groups, or voting preferences categorized by gender, things like that you can find out from these frequency distributions. And oftentimes you'll see frequency distributions visualized by bar charts or pie charts, and you can make that distribution a lot easier to interpret in that more visual way. In the report, the example report that I've linked and that we're going to actually look at, I will show you that in just a second. Univariate versus bivariate measures. So think of uni and bi. So univariate data analyzes a single variable to describe its characteristics. That's where you get things like distribution and central tendency. Bivariate data analyzes the relationship or correlation between 2 variables. So maybe you're looking at the correlation between age and test score. We'll get into correlations in another future session coming up. Or maybe you're looking at cross tabulations here. So age by test score. So different how different ages had different test scores. So again, think of univariate data as you're measuring 1 variable, and bivariate data analyzing the relationship between 2 variables. Again, univariate focuses 1 at a time. You're going to use frequency distributions here, measures of central tendency, measures of variability here as well. And then bivariate data, this might include things like scatter plots, correlation coefficients, regression analyses. Again, all these things that we're going to talk about upcoming. But now the main thing I wanted to get to today, this I'm kind of going fairly quickly through the other slides, is I want to get to this example exercise. So I want you, and I've linked it in the notes as well, and it's on the Moodle page under a reading, but this City of Greeley, Colorado Community Engagement Strategy Evaluation Report. I want you to identify the results, the descriptive results, and how they are used. And look at the descriptive table. So I'm going to click on that link, and we're going to go to it right now. You can see a Jimmy Carter documentary pulled up on my HBO Max account. Apologies for anyone who got distracted by that as I did. So as we go through, I want you to scroll all the way to the bottom of this report where the data starts. So keep going, keep going. Oop, went a little bit too far. It's in Appendix A. It's on page 26, a little less than halfway down. And under the first areas, you're going to find examples of descriptive data. So remember what I said? Identify the descriptive results and how they're used, and identify the descriptive tables. We're going to identify the cross-tabulation tables later. I want you to specifically focus on pages 26 through, excuse me, 26 through 99. That's going to have a descriptive table. You don't have to read through all of that by any means, especially a lot of it are qualitative responses as you're seeing me flip through these slides. But if I go to page 26, you start with demographics. And remember, we talked about descriptives and frequency results. What is there? What is actually in the data? So you're going to see age of participants. So frequency in this table is going to show the amount of people who responded for that specific category. Percent is going to be the percentage of respondents that responded in accordance to that. So in terms of the total. So under 20, 9 people responded that they were under 20 years old in the survey. That correlates, that coincides that is 2.1% of the total of 422 individuals. So that's how you're going to read these charts. I just want you to familiarize yourself with these demographic tables, for example, that show frequency results. Let me see. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so the demographic tables are really good examples here. Also, as you get into the more content questions here, so like residents' current involvement with the city, how would you rate your level of involvement with the city of Greeley? 1 being not involved and 5 being very involved. So you're going to see the same sort of thing here. And then you're even going to see those measures of central tendency, like means. So you can get a mean score. And what does that mean? Try to think about what is this coded numerical data actually giving us in terms of mean score? So a higher mean score here would mean that there's more engagement with the city, right? So a 2.92 mean score, it's kind of in the middle. So not a lot of people are super engaged. Not a ton of people are not engaged at all. So that's where you're going to have a wide variability there. So familiarize yourself with those descriptive tables. Again, thinking about frequencies and percentages, about how often things are coming up in the data. What are you seeing from it? We're going to run a couple as practice as well, but I want you just to identify and try to describe these tables. So how would I describe some of these tables? Table number 7. How do you engage with online platforms on a daily basis, such as checking mail, social media, finding information? How would I describe a table like this as a researcher? Well, I could say most widely, 74.2% of respondents in the city of Greeley say that they would engage with online platforms on a daily basis using smartphones and computers. And then I could say the next highest percentage at 14.7% would be using their smartphone only. The next highest at 8.4% using their computer only. And then just 0.7% of I don't have a computer, smartphone or computer. And then just 2% said other. And you can see the other options on the right there. So that's just an example of how to describe a table. I want you to get practice with that. We will get practice with that in coming sessions and in your assignments too. So I want you to make sure you know you can describe this data, not just identify it, but act as if you were the researcher describing it. So go back, it is linked under here, under the slides. You should have access if you use your cord.edu email. It's a OneDrive link. So let me know if you have any issues identifying that or accessing that. And of course, the PDF is linked on Moodle. So go through those descriptive statistics, and we'll talk more about that in a future session. I mentioned multiple response data, and we're going to recode multiple response data in SPSS. We'll get to that in just a second because I want to show you what does SPSS data actually look like. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run a couple of frequencies. Again, go back and look at the frequencies and cross tabulations walkthrough after these next couple of sessions. That is included. That video is included on the Moodle page. But let's look at SPSS data. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to go to our Spring Moodle page. And under, let's see, that is for a different course. for a medical sociology course, which maybe you'll want to take in the future. So under the class day past both these next couple. It looks like 214 is the class day here listed. Right before the frequencies and cross tabulations walkthrough video, there's a data set for use for the class. Make sure you click on that, and it's going to be a .sav file. And .sav files open up SPSS, which is our statistical analysis software. Okay, so we're going to use SPSS to actually analyze these survey results. So click on that and it'll download that data set. And then when you make sure that you have SPSS working, I'll show you what this data set looks like when it opens up. There it is. This is what an example data set looks like. You're like, what is going on here? So I want to show you a couple of things. You can kind of skip the overview page. Not entirely important. Let's start with data view. Do you see all of these numbers? All of these numbers correlate with specific answer choices. So remember, we correlated things like strongly agree to strongly disagree, but we coded it from a 1 through 5 scale. That's what it looks like in SPSS because we did that. And the reason why we did that, so we can get measures of central tendency like means, medians, and modes. We can get those things more easily now that it's numerical data. So then you can see it's just all of these data except for the open choices. So as people can enter text, it's more words and qualitative data. But let me go to variable view, okay? Variable view shows you those coded values. So for instance, let's say you made a strongly agree to strongly disagree scale. If you want to look at what those values actually are, you can click on this value section. You can see for this question, strongly disagree, gave it a 1. Disagree, gave it a 2. Neither agree nor disagree, gave it a 3. Agree, gave it a 4. Strongly agree, gave it a 5. Okay? So that's where you can see those codes coming in. You did that back-end coding in Qualtrics. We showed how to do that. This actually illustrates how exactly you're going to do that, or why you actually do that, because it correlates into this numerical data in SPSS. So now ignore a couple of these. Why is this strongly agree? Why is this strongly disagree? We'll get into that later. I'll tell you about that in a second. Because just the way the actual question is asked. But the label, so the label here in SPSS is actually the text of the question. So these are the different survey questions that you would have built out in Qualtrics. This is from an actual Qualtrics survey that was administered to an organization. It's a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging survey. And so these are each of the survey questions that respondents, participants, employees in this organization were asked. And you see the values that line up, including demographic variables, which are at the end. See race, see job function, gender as examples. So you see all of these key functions, okay? And so remember that demographic variables are at the end, at the bottom of the survey, and your kind of core content questions are at the top. It's kind of reverse of how we built it out, but I want to make sure that you just understand that it's just the demographics are in a different place. So familiarize yourself with how this data actually looks, okay? Now I want to show you how to run 2 frequencies, for example. Not crosstabs yet, just 2 frequencies. So we're going to go up. I think I need to share my full screen instead, so you can see everything. All right, sharing my full screen now. So how we're going to run and actually analyze data. And again, make sure you look at that frequencies and crosstabs walkthrough video. That's going to be more succinct than this. It's going to make more sense. It's going to be more focused. But we're going to go up to this Analyze tab here in the top of your browser, or in the top of the your computer screen. So click Analyze. And we're going to scroll down. We're going to go to descriptive statistics because that's what we're doing. And we're going to run 2 frequencies, okay? Frequencies, again, are just your basic descriptors. I know you're like, well, it says descriptors right there. Ignore that. We're running frequencies and cross tabulations in this course mostly. Frequencies, cross tabulations, and correlations, okay? So focus on frequencies for now. And you're going to click on that. And you're going to see all the different all the different survey questions in your survey. So all of the different types of questions you wrote up, all the different sort of things. Ignore, because this is a real data set, ignore the recoded variables for now. I'll show you how to do that another time. Ignore those components. I'll actually, this age recorded generations we'll use a little later. But I'll show you how to recode multiple response options as well. But I want you just to focus on, well, here are all of your survey questions, right? I trust the leaders at my companies make fair and equitable hiring decisions. I want to know what that data is going to show from this actual specific company. Okay. You can also right click, and right here you see it's under variable labels, because remember I said labels for the content of the actual survey questions. If you go to variable names, you can see the different coded variables. So in yours, it would have been ordinal Q1 or ordinal Q2, ordinal scale Q. These are coded for what makes sense to this specific organization. So you don't have to memorize this by any means. I just want to make sure that you know that this is what the reason why we do it in Qualtrics is because then it shows up like this in SPSS. And so these are just your ones that start with D are your diversity questions, E, your equity questions, I, your inclusion questions, and B, your belonging questions. And when it has an L with it too, those are leadership focused specific questions. So just showing you an example of how you can actually code and sort your questions more effectively from the start in Qualtrics. So let's run a couple basic frequencies. So let's maybe run, what would be a good one? The leaders at my company are a diverse group of people. That might show some interesting data. Let's look at that one. I'm going to now, don't just click run. Okay, don't just click run on the bottom right side. Go up to the top right and click statistics. And here you see those measures of central tendency. Let's click on each of those: mean, median, and mode. Just it's a good reference point for us. Now, if we want to continue with that, let's click continue. And then let's click OK. And it's going to pop up in a second window, a second SPS window. Let's make that a little bigger. And we can see this is what a descriptive statistic looks like. This is what it looks like. So we're going to look at first the statistics at the top. We're going to see mean, median, and mode. Remember, we selected those measures of central tendency. So the mean for this question is a 2.99. The median's a 3, pretty close. And a mode, what answer was selected most often, is a 4. Okay? So then we can go down to this table, and we can see the leaders at my company are a diverse group of people. So from strongly disagree to disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree and strongly agree, all those categories that we're talking about in these Likert scales, you can see the frequency, the percent, and the valid percent, and the cumulative percent. I want you to ignore percent and cumulative percent for now. I want you to think of only as focus on frequency and valid percent, because what those show you is frequency, how often each answer choice was actually selected, and then valid percent out of all of the people who answered this question, what percentage of those actually selected that answer. So strongly disagree, 9 people selected that. Equivalates to 7.6% of respondents. And so again, that's how you get to those tables like you see in the City of Greeley report, that communication and engagement report. This is the type of analysis that was run, and then that data was inputted into a table. And you're going to do that yourselves for your quantitative research assignment. Let's run another. Let's run one more frequency. Maybe let's do a different one. This company holds a commitment to being inclusive of all people. I want to know how employees respond to that. Whoops, excuse me. Frequencies. Let's go back to that. Commitment to being inclusive of all people. Because you had already just run the statistics in mean, median, mode, you don't have to select it again, but I recommend just checking. Make sure you've got everything selected properly. I'm going to click OK to run it again. And so it actually just ran 2 for me. Because I had 2 selected, it'll run both at the same time. So you don't have to do them individually if you don't want. But let's focus on This company holds a commitment to being inclusive of all people. Okay. So you can see the N there means the total number of people that actually responded to this question. So 118 total people answered this question in the survey. Ignore the top one because we just did that one, right? Leaders at my company are a diverse group of people. But let's look at this company holds a commitment to being inclusive of all people. So you can see mean, median, mode. The mean here, 4.06, let's really focus on that average. That mean is a lot higher than the other questions, over a full point higher. That means that more people in this company believe that the company holds a commitment to being inclusive of all people than people believe that the leaders at their company are a diverse group of people. Does that make sense? You see why those means are important in describing this data? A higher mean here means more people agree with that statement than this on the left here, the prior statement. So let's look at that. So let's say, for example, this company holds a commitment to being inclusive of all people. 72 people who responded to this agree with that statement. So over 61, just exactly 61% of individuals agree with that statement. And then almost 25% strongly agree. So again, these are examples of how you describe this data. Okay, you describe it by, that's literally what these descriptive statistics are for. So you can describe the data like this. And what I really want you to do is go practice, practice, practice. Just run some descriptive data. Start talking in your head about it or out loud of how would I describe this data? What am I actually finding out about this? And if you're confused, that's why we're here. So we can meet with you one-on-one and make sure that, hey, what isn't making sense here? How do you describe this data? Maybe you come across a question that's really interesting. You're like, I don't know exactly how to describe that data. Well, this is what it's here for. So let's open this back up. You can see my notes section there. So we just ran a couple of frequencies. Again, make sure you go into that frequencies and crosstabs walkthrough video. That'll be even extra helpful. I just want to remind you about SPSS Access too, because we want to make sure that you get that downloaded and then you can actually access it because you can't practice unless you have this. So make sure that SPSS is downloaded and working on your computer. But I want to go back quick as kind of a coda to this video. It's just kind of an extra. I want to show you how to respond, how to recode and analyze multiple response data in SPSS. So what this would be is like a select all that apply question where you don't just select one option, you select multiple. And we did a couple of those in our survey, right? So let's go back to the data. I'm going to exit this out. You can actually save this as a file if you want. So you can always pull up the output that you pulled up. I don't want to save it. So I'm not going to. But let's say we want to go to a question that they could select multiple options. For example, race. They can select multiple options in this survey. Instead of a racial category, we select one, you could select multiple because people can be multiple races. So you're going to look at the different options that come up because they appear as separate questions because you can answer multiple. So each of these answers in a multiple response option question is coded with a one variable. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each one has their separate question listed with a one variable. Probably like, well, how is that helpful? I can't analyze my racial category now. What race these folks are. Let me show you how to do that. So let's say I wanted to analyze that. Remember, each one is coded as a one. So I'm going to analyze. I'm going to scroll down to multiple response. And you see, it doesn't even let you analyze anything yet. First, you got to define your variable sets. So I'm going to define my variable sets. Let's make this bigger. I'm going to scroll down to race. What is your race? See how it comes up as multiple answer options? Let's hold the shift key down and select each one of these. Oops. Let's select each one, all right? You can actually scroll all the way down and do it like that. And then you put this little arrow to the right, and that's going to show you what variables are actually in this set. So we're going to code it as dichotomies because it's just one variable. If there was categories, let's say if it was a 1 through 5 that they could answer, then we would code it as 1 through 5. But here, it's just a 1. So I'm going to click 1 in there. And then we have to name it. So I'm going to name it the same thing in both areas. So just put it race, recoded, race, oops, recoded. So let's make sure we make that change now. So we're going to click this add button, and we just added it. So now it's under race recoded. Close this window. I promise it'll save. Close this window. Now you're going to go back up to analyze, scroll back down again to multiple responses, and then click on frequencies. And race recoded is in there. See that? So I'm going to click in there. Race recoded. I want to know my frequencies for race recoded. Let's try it. Let's see what appears. And there you go. And you can see in this same table now, it's all under one table. Instead of analyzing, I'll show you what it would look like if you tried to do a basic frequency table with it. So let's say I wanted to look at them all without doing that. It appears in separate data tables as separate questions. Well, that doesn't do us a whole lot of good unless we want to do a lot of manual work. So that's why you want to do this multiple response analysis. So if in your survey or in your data, you want to explore in recoding these multiple responses, that's how it's done. And let's meet one-on-one if you have any questions. Like, I really want to know how to do this. I really want to do this. We can meet one-on-one about it. So that's how that works. And you can even do crosstabs with that too. And we'll talk about that a little later. Actually, next class session, we'll do that same thing. All right, I know we went through this quickly. It's because there's already a frequencies and crosstabs walkthrough video, okay, on the Moodle page. And I want you to really refer to that for your assignment. For all the analyses you're going to do, that's what you should really refer to, okay? Now, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to meet one-on-one at any point. As always, we already have been a little bit. So make sure you reach out to me and then ask me any questions that you do have. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk about next session, running some cross tabulations.